The following program is rated T for teen for the use of tools and materials that can be harmful to unsupervised usage. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello everyone, Mr. Waugh here from Mr. Waugh Media, and yes, that is my actual name. In today's episode, we'll be making feudal Japanese style buildings. Welcome back to the show, everyone. I know it's been a minute since the last episode. Unfortunately, I had to put it on the back burner for a little while. Work got a little bit busy, and I just didn't have the time to devote to this. However, we are back. In today's episode, we're going to be making feudal Japanese style buildings. Now, this one is a pretty basic design. It's still got some nice detail work, but nothing too crazy. If you've ever seen traditional Japanese style architecture, you know how complicated and beautiful it can get. But maybe, if that's something that piques your interest, we could do it as an upcoming episode. Let me know in the comments down below if that's something that might pique your interest. But for today, this template, simple design, takes 2 hours to build, handful of dollars of material, and you get a really nice single-family building like this. But with the template, you can make it a lot larger, you can make it into a temple, a palace, a dojo, whatever sparks your imagination. Let's get started. Alright, to start this build off, we're going to need a base for the structure to sit on. For this, we'll take a 1/4 inch piece of styrofoam, and we're going to mark it out to be 6 inches in length and 4 inches in width. Of course, you can make this larger or smaller depending on what kind of structure you're building, but for me, this is going to be a single family household kind of thing, and I think this size will be more than enough for what I need. We're going to need an awful lot of wooden panels to cover the entire base with, so we'll take some coffee stir sticks and start chopping them to be 6 inches in length. We're going to need a lot of them, so get ready to do some harvesting. Oh yeah! We'll start with the side of the base here, and that's usually going to be 2 coffee stir sticks. Some of them are a little bit thicker than others. This one you can see there's a little bit of a gap there, but it's not really that big of a deal. We'll just chop off anything that's going over the edge here. We'll do all 4 sides. I don't think you really need to see me doing each one individually, so we'll do a little bit of a time lapse here, and we'll go from there once all 4 edges have been fully completed. Time for a time lapse. We're back. Did you miss me? Probably not. Alrighty then, let's get back to it. With our 6-inch long pieces of wood, that sounds suggestive as hell, we'll start laying it down one by one. Now, I'll be the first to admit, this does eat up a little bit of time here, so I think out of all the steps, this one also kind of warrants a bit of a time jump. I'm going to assume that most of you are able to follow these steps pretty well and aren't going to burn your house down, so I think we're in safe hands here. We can do a bit of a time jump until you get something that looks a little bit like this. Once again, we'll just chop off anything that's sort of sticking over the edge here. We'll try to make it as smooth as possible. Make sure you got a nice sharp blade for this step, and if you have followed my instructions to the letter, you're going to get something looking a little bit like this. Unless you're Owen, then you probably just burned your house down. Alright, moving on. We're going to start working on the walls of the structure. For these ones, they're going to clock in at 1.5 inches in height and 4.5 inches in length. Not really much more to say here, they're just pretty basic panels. As for the front and the back, these ones are going to come in at 2.5 in height and 3 inches in width. I'm now going to mark them at the 1.5 mark on the sides here, and then triangulate it up to the very middle here, and that is where the roof will be. Make sure you measure pretty cleanly here. What's the old saying? You measure twice, cut once, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. Make sure your blade is, again, nice and sharp here. Don't want any jagged parts, and there we go. Pretty straightforward. I'll do the front and the back here. Nothing really more to say on that one. Eventually, you'll have all 4 pieces. And then this part is pretty straightforward. You just glue them together and you make it like a basic structure. You can check out my episode where I did the rustic cabin. It's pretty much exactly the same thing. It's we're basically just making a dollhouse here, you know what I mean? And as I said earlier, this is the size for maybe a single-family farmhouse or something of that nature. It's a basic template, but if you guys get some crazy ideas and make something bigger and more elaborate, that's totally up to you. I'm just giving you guys the blueprints. From there, the sky really is the limit. Now that the solid structure is out of the way, it's time to start working on the framing for the building. Now, to do this, you can either take the coffee stir sticks that I've already previously mentioned, or for me, I went out and got for about $1 a couple centimeters in width by 2 feet long strip of balsa wood. That way the width will always be consistent. I don't have to worry about imperfections in the coffee stir sticks. So that's kind of my go-to here. I'm going to mount it not quite at the top of the sidewall here, but maybe a few centimeters below that. This is going to be part of the design. I saw this in a lot of Japanese-style architecture when I was doing a bit of research, and although it's not quite as detailed as those authentic buildings, I think you'll get sort of the gist of what I'm going for here. So I'll mount them into place with the hot glue gun, and once that is down, we're going to start putting in a center pillar here, and this will be a little bit smaller. I'll just measure it sort of on the fly here. I will admit, when I was filming this, there was a lot of improv. I'm kind of just shooting from the hip here. I always recommend measuring twice and cutting once, but you know, sometimes you're just in the groove and you're just sort of vibing. You know what I mean? We're vibing here. I'm going to put the column going all the way through, so it'll go to the top here. This is only going to be a couple centimeters. Use a pretty generous glob of glue here. Just keep it in place. And there we go. That's the design that I'm going for. I'll do the other side here, and we'll go from there. As you can see, I've preemptively already put a couple of the pillars in on the left and the right hand there. These are identical to the ones that you see on the side of the building. They clock in at 1.5 inches. And when I was satisfied with those, it was time to bolt a beam across the top. And I'll just throw that down with some hot glue gun here. When I'm satisfied with this all being in place, looks pretty clean to me, we're going to start working on the framing for the front entrance. These will also clock in at 1.5 inches. I'm going to cut clean here, make sure it's fitting nicely there, then I'll cut out the second one. And these are basically going to just be a couple of centimeters away from the edge, and it's got that kind of, I guess, traditional Japanese flavor here. Again, I'm not going anywhere near as detailed as some of those buildings get, but it gives you a really nice template to work with. Alright, I'm satisfied with the ones on the bottom here. Now it's time to continue them going up through the middle pillar there. I'll cut at an angle, and when you're doing this, just be careful, make sure you have a nice sharp blade, because otherwise when working with balsa wood it tends to fracture and fragment, so just be aware of that. But overall, these ones are looking pretty clean here. I'll just use another glob of glue. And with that, our front entrance is pretty much done here. So I'm going to do the exact same, or a slightly different design on the back, but the same principles, and we'll go from there. Alright, next up we're going to start working on the roof, and this will be a little cereal box that is 5 inches by 5 inches. I'll make a scoring in the very middle here just to make it bend a little bit easier, so don't cut all the way through, just enough so you can bend it without any issues. You can see here it's going to rest on the building like so. And this is what we're going to build upwards with all of our tiles. And to do this, we're going to use some wavy cardboard, and they're going to be 1 inch in thickness. It's going to take about 8 or 9 inches of the material, so make sure you have a pretty large slab. And we're just going to start slicing here. Make sure your blade is really, really sharp, as I've always said, especially with this stuff though, because if you have a jagged blade, it tends to catch on this stuff and tear it really badly. So yeah, make sure your blade is nice and clean. That way you don't have to, you know, basically throw out any of this precious wavy cardboard. And once I've harvested what I feel is going to be enough here, what we're going to do is start working on the tiles. We're going to glue it at the very bottom here. So this is going to be 5 inches. And we're just going to mount it like so, using the hot glue gun. I suppose in a pinch you could also use some white glue, but let's face it, you're not really doing much finessing and moving with these sort of things, so I don't think it really matters. But in a pinch, it always does come in handy as well. Alright, we're going to do the other side here, and I'm going to try to make them as even as possible here, mirror it as best I can. With the next layer, I'm basically putting a thin strip of the hot glue gun at the very edge of the first layer, and then right onto the cardboard itself. And then I'm just going to mount it down. We're just going to do this with every layer, a little bit on the cardboard, a little bit on the wavy segment. And we're just going to keep layering it up piece by piece. For this one in particular, it's probably going to take about 3 or 4 layers. If you're doing a larger roof, obviously it's going to require much more resources than that. But for now, I think we're going to be pretty good with just getting away with this. Alright, this actually is going to be my last layer, I think. I think I can get away with 3 here. So I'll put 1 at the very top, 1 on the wavy cardboard, like so. Looks pretty good. And then I will do the exact same on the other side here. like so. Perfect. And then we're just going to trim off the excess with the scissors here. Looks pretty good. Now for the top part, this is something that I sort of struggled with for a while. What am I going to do here? And I came up with a kind of cool solution. So what I'm going to do is take a strip here, and I'm going to put pressure in the very middle, make a light scoring if I have to. And yeah, you can see here, little light scoring. And then what I'm going to do is fold it over both sides of my ruler and make sort of an L shape with it. And then we're just going to mount this right on the top. And I did this on a couple prototypes, and it turned out looking really good. I was actually quite happy with this solution. So we'll just mount this here, and put a pretty generous glob of the glue on both sides here. And with that, the top of our roof is finished. And I think this really looks cool. We'll get rid of the excess here with the scissors like before. And I think at this point, we can call this done. That looks pretty slick, eh? Alright, I'm happy with this. We're going to mount it now. Take the frame, and we're just going to mount it to our base. I'm not going to put the roof on just because it's going to make it a lot easier in the painting segment. But for all intents and purposes, with the roof there, our construction is finished. Alright, it is time to start doing some painting. As you can see, I primed the entire thing with some black. Now we're going to go in there with 2 parts white and 2 parts black to make a medium gray color. And this is going to get frantically dry brushed into all the areas that's not the frame of the walls. Keep the frames intact as much as you can, obviously. If you get something on there, it's not the end of the world, but we'll try to aim for the mid. You can also see there's still a little bit of the black showing. There's going to be some natural shadowing in there. It almost looks like I'm being sloppy with this, but there is a method to my madness. If we keep doing this in layers, it's going to add natural texture to the thing, and it's going to look really good in the end. Next up, we're going to do 3 parts white to 1 part black, so we're going with a lighter gray now, and we're going to go over all the same areas, but as we go, my dry brushes are getting lighter and lighter, and I'm going to focus a little bit more in the middle. I'm not going quite all the way to the edge. I know it's kind of hard to see that on the camera, but I'm not going all the way to the frame anymore. I'm stopping millimeters away from it, and this just comes with practice, right? But again, as we build this up, it's going to add more and more layers. I'm going to add a little bit more white to my brush now, so at this point it's basically 1 part black, 5 parts white, and I'm just going to keep repeating this process over and over again. Now, eventually I'm going to use just pure white, because I thought that looked really slick and clean. If you, at any point, are like, I like how this looks already, I don't want to go any further, then by all means, you can stop at a light gray color if you want. You don't have to go pure white. That's totally your artistic decision. But for me, I feel once I get to the pure white, it's really going to make this whole thing pop out. And yeah, I just think this is looking really cool. And with that, we'll move on to the final layer here, and this is the previously mentioned pure white. At this point, there's hardly anything in the bristles. It's a very light dry brushing, and we'll just go over all the panels. With that, we are finished the main wall segments. And you'll get something that looks a little bit like this, and with the walls out of the way, it's now time to work on the tricky part, the frames, with bright red colors. The reason this part is tricky is you have to be very careful, very meticulous, because as anyone can tell you, getting red stains out of a white wall is very difficult. Just ask my roommate, Hannibal Lecter. So I'm going to go extremely slow here with this crimson color. This one's called Corn Red from Citadel, but basically any kind of scarlet or crimson should suffice. Alright, I'm going to take my time here. You can see how painstakingly slow I'm going. Even with the video sped up, I'm still going at a pretty slow pace. You can imagine how slow it is in real time. I'm going to do all the frames with this color. It's going to take me a while, so let's just do another time lapse. Go slow, for the love of God. I will see you on the other side. With that all out of the way, I'm now going to go in with a bright blood red. This one's called Mephistem. And what I'm basically going to do is, in the middle of each of the beams, I'm going to do a thin layer. So there's still a little bit of the crimson and scarlet on each side of it. And this is just going to make it really pop out. Again, go super slow with this, and you're going to get something looking like this. With the dreaded red out of the way, it's time to start working on the base. But even though this is a bigger area, it doesn't mean we can be any less sloppy than we did on the panels. Because again, if brown stains get on the wall, it's going to leave a mark. Just ask my mother. No, please don't, because that's a very embarrassing story. Anyway, I'm going to use this dark chocolate color, and it's going to get dry brushed over the panels like this. Once that is ample time to dry, we're going to go in with some just generic burnt umber. We'll dry brush that over all of the panels. Again, making sure not to get too close to the walls. And yeah, this was a little bit annoying because I'm paranoid out of my mind getting anything on those white walls. If you do happen to have any spillage on there, attack it right away with water, and just try to mop it up as best you can. But unfortunately, it will stain on these beautiful pure walls, so just bear that in mind. Once that layer's done, I'm going to go in with 1 part brown and 1 part sandy yellow to make it this light sand color. We'll keep rinsing, repeating, dry brushing it on all the surfaces, yada yada yada. And just for the love of God, don't get it on the walls. I cannot stress that point enough. I hope that lesson sunk in here. So if any of you get it on the walls, you were warned. All right, let's get this last piece here. Just keep stroking. Just keep stroking. Try not to have a stroke either. I mean, it's very stressful, but like, for the love of God, don't have a stroke, because then I'm going to be blamed for it. And I can't afford another lawsuit, so let's not go there. All right, and with this last little segment here, this is what our basing is looking like so far. Breathtaking. Alright, taking that same mix that we just had, I'm going to add a little bit of white to it, and as the color's getting lighter and lighter, so too are my brush strokes. At this point, there is very little in the bristles. I'm just going over it, and because it is a natural wood, right, this isn't strips of cardboard or anything like that, this is genuine wood, it's going to have tiny little grains built into it, and the paint is going to pick that all up, which makes it a really nice material to work with. So I'm just going to keep going here with this lighter sand color, dry brush it on all the surfaces. Yeah, not much more to say. This is what we're looking at. It's looking pretty good so far. Alright, and from there, it's now time to stain the wood. My go-to for stuff like this is called Agrax Earthshade from Citadel Paints. It's a really nice one to work with, but you can use other brands out there. I also sometimes mess around with Vallejo Strong Tone. That does it too. Soft Tone's not bad either. But yeah, we're just going to cover the entire surfaces, and for the love of God, don't get the stain on the white wall panel, because then you're hooped. But this is what it looks like. It's still a little wet, so it has a little bit of glisten there, but that's going to be a really nice shade. With the main structure out of the way, it's time to start working on the roof. As you can see, I've already primed it black, although I did miss a couple places, so I'll have to go back over that with a wash later on. But for the first layer of paint, this is going to be Stegodon Scale Green from Citadel Paints. I guess if you were to make your own version of this, the best way I can describe it is kind of a darkish gray color with a bluish teal tint to it. No, it's kind of an abstract, but that is what it's going to look like with the first layer down. Once I've given that ample time to dry, I'm going to go in with a paint called Dark Reaper, and this is the same thing. In a pinch, you could take a dark gray with the blue and add a little bit of white to the mix to make it a lighter color. But yeah, I'm just going to dry brush this over everything, rinse and repeat. You can see here. With that, we'll move on to the next layer. I've taken that Dark Reaper and added something called Administratum Gray, which is a very palish gray color. It's got a little bit of color tint in it. Blink and it's gone. We're already done that layer. Now we're going to go in with a wash. And this is just going to be black, pure black in all the crevices. This stuff's called Null Oil from Citadel, and that's sort of my go-to, again, like the Agrax Earthshade. But this one, it doesn't make it look grimy. It just sinks into there, gives you nice shadows like this. Voila. Think we're done with the roof. Alright, and the very last thing we're going to work on is the front door. This is a 1 inch by 1 inch piece of cereal box that I'm going to lightly score with the blade here every couple millimeters to do a mock-up of wooden planks. In theory, I could have used the coffee stir sticks or the balsa wood strips, but this works just as well. And once I'm done scoring, I'll bend them just to really enunciate it. Then we'll go on to the painting segment. Now, overall, it is pretty much the exact same technique that I used on the base of the structure, except this has a little bit more brown in it, so I don't think I really need to repeat that, otherwise it'd be a little bit redundant overall. It's a little bit darker. I think I did 2 stains on it instead of just 1. And I'm going to bolt it down in the middle here. I'm going to hand draw a couple sigils on there just to make it a little bit more interesting. You can see in the corners. And with that, we are finished our build. And I know, like every video I always say, I really do like this build, but I do genuinely mean it each time. This was really quick and easy. I think with the prototypes and some of the experimentation, it took a couple hours from start to finish. And it's a really nice, clean build. With this, you can build much larger structures, you can do different variants, you can do 2-story buildings and that sort of thing. But the principle will always be the same with the framing, the roof. It's a nice, simple, clean build. I really hope you guys liked it. And with that, I think we can wrap up the episode. Well, that has been today's episode. I really hope you guys liked it and maybe found some useful information in there. If you did, make sure that you hit the like, the share, and subscribe button down below, and please pass this around to all your friends. We're really trying to build the channel from the ground up. If there's anything that you want me to build in an upcoming episode, let me know in the comments down below, and maybe we'll be able to build it for you in the future. On that note, I've been Mr. Waugh from Mr. Waugh Media, signing off.